Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to our second in a two-part series on 10 ways to unlock a winning product management team. Make sure that I can advance my slides. Here we go. I am joined once again by Jen Cano, who's based in Philadelphia, or at least is based in Philadelphia today, as I understand it. So for folks who don't know, Jen is actually moving today, so I want to give her extra kudos for helping us in the second part of the series, even though her house is almost empty. Is that right? Yep.
Totally empty, almost.
So thanks for joining again, Jen. And for those of you who don't remember, Jen began the dance between marketing and product management in 2003 and has made a career of leading by influence. Today, she is Vice President of Product at Elsevier, a global digital media company. In this role, she drives product strategy and vision for solutions in the healthcare industry. And if you're not familiar, I'm Roger Snyder. I'm the VP of Marketing at 280 Group. So thanks again for joining us. And let's move on to some of our administrative tasks before we dive into our material. First off, I would recommend that you join our LinkedIn group, and I'll paste this link in a moment. But by joining this group, you're able to continue conversations about how to interact as a product management leader and how to just get ideas from other folks. We find that this group is really helpful in being able to bounce ideas off, make suggestions, share articles. It's really been a great way to be able to continue growing in your career as a product management leader. So join that group. I've just put the link in there for you. And let's talk about some other questions that often come up. First of all, there is a questions panel in GoToWebinar. We've got it highlighted here on the screen for you. So please enter questions as we're speaking, and we will have time at the end to go over your questions so that we can have this be more interactive and be able to help you with the current situations that you're facing. The next thing is that most people, the most frequently asked question is, can I watch this later? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. All attendees will receive an email with the link to the recording after the webinar's ended, typically later in the day. So look for that email. It'll include that link. It'll also include a resource that we're going to provide to you. And I'm going to just kind of tease you about that for now and tell you more about it near the end of the webinar. All right, so a little bit about 280 Group for those of you who are not familiar. Our mission is to help you to empower product managers and product marketers with the knowledge and tools to build products that matter to your company, products that matter to your customers, and products that hopefully even matter to the world at large, so that you can build products that really help meet company goals as well as satisfy customer needs. All right. And 280 Group has a number of services available to you. I'm not going to go over this big list for you because I want to have more time for the content, but basically we can help with training, recruiting, optimizing a product management team. To learn more, go to 280group.com. All right, and one more thing, this is a continuing series, and today our emphasis is going to be on how to transform your team, because we're talking about team culture. It's an exciting topic because it's one of those more sort of soft skill topics that folks don't necessarily talk about as much. And we're excited to have Jen here with me to talk about how, as leaders in product management, you can transform your team by paying attention to your culture. And Jen, we took a look at everybody who registered, and we have a good mix here again. We've got nearly 30% of leadership here, directors and VPs of product management, a large number of product managers as well, or product marketing managers. We expect those are folks that are probably looking to lead a team someday. So exciting to have them on board. And then a large number of other folks as well. So folks maybe be interested in product management as working with them or potentially joining a product management team in the future. So everybody, though, can benefit from what we're talking about today because everyone contributes to team culture and the power of team culture. All right, so we want to get started now with a poll so that we can get a sense. I'm assuming that some folks were here last month and therefore probably already remember this section, but I also want to get a sense of, well, maybe there are new folks that are attending for the first time, and how much time should we spend talking about this underlying aspect of team culture? So I've launched the poll and I'm distributing it now, and we'd like to understand how well you understand team culture. Is it something that you kind of have a vague understanding of? Is it something that you recognize a good one when you see it? Is it something where I know what it is, but I'm not sure how to guide it? or I know what it is and I know how I can shape it as well. So we're going to leave the poll open for a little while so that we can get folks to participate. Yep, now the votes are starting to come in. This is great. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to add, Jen, while we're waiting for the poll to run.
No, I'm excited about our topics for today, talking about how to move from vision to action, talking about how to enforce or to foster ownership, looking at how to be a servant leader. I know you have good topics as well. Really excited about these ones today. I think we saved the best for the second half.
Excellent. And for those who didn't get to attend last month, you can go to our website and you'll be able to watch last month's webinar. So you'll get filled in on the first 5 of the 10 that we discussed in the last webinar. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and I'm going to share the results so that everybody can see them. So 23% of folks said, I recognize a good one when I see it. No one said I only have a vague understanding. So I suspect there's some attendees that were here last month, which is great. 54% said, I know what it is, but not how to guide it. And 23% said, I know what it is and how I can shape it. So that center target, we're talking about what 77% either kind of recognize it, or in both cases, don't know how to guide it. So that's great because we're going to give you some concrete examples today of how to go about guiding your team culture as a product management team leader. So given that folks seem to have some understanding of this, I'm going to go over this fairly quickly this time. And I recommend that if you're not familiar with the underpinnings of team culture, go watch the webinar that we did last month and you'll get a deeper understanding of this. But team culture is this concept of you've got a set of values, attitudes, and beliefs. There's a sense of a social and psychological environment, and that's kind of what you come to work to every day. And these days, this culture is even more important because there's less and less of a physical space that you inhabit together. So many folks are now working from home instead of working in a group where you can have a coffee machine conversation, right? So this culture becomes even more important, where understanding our values and attitudes, knowing what people's assumptions and beliefs are, those things then end up driving the behaviors of the whole team and driving the way things get done. So company culture is just crucial to your success. And in fact, a couple of quotes here from Inc. We have, it's an essential component in any business's ultimate success or failure. And Gartner goes even further, saying the culture of an organization, more than business strategy, actually determines how the business grows and transforms. So having an explicit kind of understanding, being conscious about your company culture, your team culture in this case, and then driving it in the direction you want it to be is a powerful way to make your team way more effective than if you are just sort of ignoring that underpinning of team culture. I don't know, Jen, if you want to add anything before we go on.
I think that our topics are going to really underscore that today, how those that culture can be even more powerful in the velocity of your team and the growth than business strategy sometimes, if done right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you need both, obviously, right? But the team culture is clearly a key contributor to the success of your team. So I also, we presented this last month as well, and Jen and I found this framework from Gartner that talks about how do I actually influence my team culture? How do I get more concrete about what are the elements of my team culture? And as you go around this wheel of these 4 attributes of business culture, let me highlight a few things. So the way you go about making decisions, the more explicit you are about how decisions are made, the more everyone understands, okay, we get it. We know what we need to do in order to make a good decision around here. Now, oftentimes you need to think about velocity, how quickly we make decisions, versus the degree of depth you're going to put into your analysis, your market research, your coming up with a proposal and solution. And there's no right answer here, right? It depends on the size of your company, it depends on the industry of your company, but you just want to be explicit, transparent about how do you go about making decisions in your organization so that folks understand what kind of research, what kind of analysis needs to be done, and how quickly decisions will get made. So if you're explicit about that, and you control that by tuning your messages about how quickly and how much analysis is done, then you've got a way that everyone understands how decisions get made. The second aspect of business culture is how you go about engagement. What's your communication style? Is it very formal or is it very informal? And what are the expectations for when should you be communicating something versus when you should just work on it yourself? How do you go about internal communications within your team versus all the communications that happen with all of the different teams that your product management team works with? Do you do things via email? Do you do things via Asana? Are you expected to use Slack, right? What are all of those different mechanisms and styles? All of that, then again, being transparent and explicit about that, setting expectations helps the team be effective in communicating amongst themselves and across the entire organization. And so that's elements of how we engage. Another aspect of this is how you go about measuring success. And this is both about your products, what are your KPIs for your products, as well as how do you measure the success of your team. Are you setting quarterly goals for each of your product managers? And do those quarterly goals include not just how well their product's doing, but how well they're doing in terms of their career advancement, right? So both of those aspects are crucial to, and again, being explicit about that, having that written down and being clear about how you go about measuring success makes your culture explicit about what matters and what doesn't matter, right? Jen, jump in here if you want to say anything about these various topics.
Yeah, so I mean, as we applied this framework to our different topics here, I don't know about you, Roger, but for me, it caused me to really be introspective a bit about and reflective on my own strategies, what I have put into practice over my career to really get analytic about it.
Wow,
And
right.
I think that you're going to have a worksheet after this, right, for folks to be able to use and fill out. And I would encourage those listening to take those worksheets and use this framework. Use it for other aspects of your product management leadership as well. So a dynamite tool, I think, for that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll talk more about that. Jen's teasing you as well. And then the last aspect of evaluating and understanding the attributes of your team culture is how we go about working, right? What are your actual practices and processes? How do you allocate your budget? And is your budget allocated in such a way that the budget supports what you say is important in your team? How do you go about problem solving? Is it something where each individual product manager just solves their own problems, or do they bring problems together with other product managers and expect to get some interplay? All of those things need to be thought about, and you need to be explicit about them so that everybody is consistent in how they go about doing this product to product, and everyone understands what the expectations are of how do we work across the entire product management team, and how you work as the product manager leading your product team, how you're following all those processes as well. And so for each of these four, we're going to give you specific tactics and strategies for the 5 keys that we're going to talk about today. So I encourage you, if you're interested in this attributes of business culture, follow up on this. You can see the link down there of Smarter with Gartner, and this is a great framework. And yes, we're going to include this in the tool that we're going to provide you at the end of the webinar. All right, so let's get to the 10 keys. Last month, we talked about part 1. We talked about starting and ending with a customer, the fact that understanding your customer's needs is crucial to your success. Product managers should stay curious about what's going on, not just with their product, but with their market, their customers, the rest of the organization, and the larger world. Product managers need to be focused on being experts. We gave some tips for how a product management leader is able to support that and be able to help build up the expertise of their product managers. And we talked about leading with influence, the fact that product managers don't get to just say, go do it, right? Their product team is typically matrixed. Nobody on the product team reports to the product manager. So you've got to have some influence skills in order to be an effective leader. And then we talked about focusing on outcomes, not just effort. It's not enough that you got through 5 sprints in a quarter. It's what benefits and value you are able to deliver to your customers with those 5 sprints that actually matter. So that's a quick recap of the 5. Again, I encourage you to go watch the webinar from last month if you want to get more details on those. And today we're going to talk about part 2, supporting the leap from imagining to doing. Don't be afraid to fail. Be a trusted partner. How you go about enabling ownership and how you instill servant leadership. And now we're going to dive into this, but before we get too deep into this, we want to conduct one more poll, get a sense from you on this question. So let me get the poll started. I'm launching the poll now. All right, so what best describes your skill level in translating a vision into an executable plan? And Jen, do you want to kind of read the bullets off here?
Yeah. So the first option is that translating a vision into an executable plan, this is where I excel. The next one, I'm proficient, but I still have room to grow. And the third option then is I struggle with this. And while they're answering maybe just a few notes about this, I think that we have very, very strong product managers who are great at vision, and many that I have worked with over the years that really struggle then with turning that vision into an executable plan, one that delivers value incrementally over time. So interested to see where this audience fits in with that.
Yeah, great.
The results yet?
All right, so I'm going to close the poll. We got the majority of folks to participate. Now I'm going to share the results. All right, yeah, so very interesting. So 8% says this is where I excel. That's fantastic. I still hope we have a couple of tips that'll help you continue to improve. 79% said I'm proficient, but I've got room to grow. So that's great. I think that's going to be a lot of folks who are going to benefit from these next topics. And then 13% say I struggle with this. So great to be honest about that. I think that, again, we're going to have some tips that will help you improve in those areas. All right, well, Jen, take it away on our first topic, number 6.
All right, fantastic. And again, I'll say, it's been, in my career, I think it's been rare to see a product manager, a product owner, a product leader who is great at everything, right? We all have things that tend to be strengths for us and things that we need some help with. And I think that leap from imagining to doing, I think that's something also that entire businesses sometimes struggle with, this leap from imagining to doing. I have a quote there from Barbara Sher, and if you get a chance to go, and there's a TED Talk from Barbara Sher, go and watch it. It's hilarious. She's a famous, business leader, seriously famous though, about how to reach a vision. And she says anything worth doing is worth doing too soon. But I want to read the whole quote though, because it's fascinating to me how she approached that. It really resonates. She says, doing is a quantum leap from imagining. Thinking of swimming isn't much like actually getting in the water. Actually getting in the water can take your breath away. The defense force inside of us wants us to be cautious, to stay away from anything as intense as a new kind of action. Its job is to protect us, and it categorically avoids anything resembling danger. But it's often wrong. Anything worth doing is worth doing too soon. I love that very much. So as we think about this leap from imagining to doing, we've got this whole big thing that we want to create, this huge problem that we want to solve in the world. And often, I have participated on innovation teams that we have outlined a North Star that is several years in the making, maybe 2 or 3, 4 years maybe in the making. And you can argue that you can't know 4 years in advance what you need to solve. And this is true. And that's why it is the next point I'll make is really important. Yeah, you need to understand that North Star so that you understand the strategic direction that you're going. But it's really important after that then to understand what the incremental smallest value that you can deliver. And I guess that the best analogy to that I've seen is the analogy to building a car. Why are they building the car? That North Star is to provide transportation. If we're really focused on the problem that we're solving rather than the thing we're building, then it starts to become easier to think about what's the first increment that I can deliver that has value. A few years ago, I was involved in an innovation project that was to span maybe 2 or 3 years. And we thought about the first increment. And as we thought through that, we thought, even that is too big. What we want for that first increment is just something that users can react to. That's all we want. It's something that has some value that users can react to. So in that analogy with the car again, we just need to provide some kind of transportation, right? Some way to get from here to there. And maybe that thing is a scooter or a skateboard. And I think we've all seen that famous image, right, of the incremental delivery from the skateboard to the scooter to the motorcycle to the clunky old car to the Ferrari. But if we will concentrate on that incremental delivery. So for leaders of product managers, that means that we need to give tools and authority to our product managers to be able to be empowered to take that incremental approach, to take very thin incremental slices that maybe aren't commercially viable in that moment, and test on them, test and layer on more and more capabilities. But I think in essence, that leap from imagining to doing is really understanding what the smallest increment of value that you can deliver in that vision, going for that, and then the next. I don't know, Roger, if you have more to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. So this North Star concept is, okay, this is where we want to get to ultimately, and we have this grand vision of the future. But what you're talking about is, okay, then we have to have this whole continuum or how do we go about making this happen over time, and what are the pieces, and I have to go the opposite direction, is what are the pieces that we need to get all the way towards that vision, right? So MVP certainly is a part of that, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But it is important to have that big vision to start with. But then, okay, how do I make those steps? So I think it's a really good point. And you've got some advice here now in terms of how do we go about making this happen in an organization. So let's go to that, right? Oops, I clicked. There we go.
Okay. So as we start to make this real, then how we work, we identify the risks first in this grand vision, right? What is the riskiest part? And start to address that riskiest part. We build a hypothesis. We test that small hypothesis. We learn and we adjust and we continue forward again. Again, this is going from big picture, and it's okay to then immediately go to thinking small.
Right.
And testing small.
Yep.
One, how we make decisions. There are the Silicon Valley product group talks about 4 risk areas: value, usability, feasibility, viability. These are the greatest to me, have been fantastic tools to use as I've led innovation teams in particular in breaking down what are our assumptions and where can we start testing in these little increments. But always, when we deliver that smallest test, is it valuable? Is it usable? Is it feasible? Is it viable?
Right, good point.
Next, how we engage. We accept flaws and failures. This is part of it. I think on my previous slide, I had perfection is the enemy.
All right.
It's absolutely the biggest enemy that you have for making that leap from the grand vision to actually executing. And also, we're here to learn. So then measure, test. That's how we measure.
Absolutely.
Roger, you have anything to add to that?
Well, that actually dovetails very nicely into the next topic, right? So I think that's what I'm going to do is move into the next one, which is number 7, don't be afraid to fail, right? And I love this quote from the second CEO of IBM, Thomas Watson Jr. If you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate, right? I love that one. I've heard many quotes about failure and success, but this one really resonated with me. And so oftentimes in a company, the mantra becomes failure is not an option, right? And actually, we've got to flip that on its head and see that actually failing is what contributes to success, as Mr. Watson said here earlier. But what I want to do is kind of reframe this whole sense of failure, right? And get to the point that you were talking about, test, right? And I call this experimentation, right? You need to have experiments that have results. And if you go into the experiment objectively, then there's neither a good nor a bad outcome. So there is no longer this sense of failure as much as what will I learn from the experiment? And to put that in concrete terms, if you're working on a user experience in a mobile application, for example, you're going to try out a new flow, or you're going to try out even just a simple change in how folks fill out a form, or a simple change in what the branch choices are, A to B, right? And you just want to tweak those little things and find out which ones are more effective. It's not a failure, right? If the numbers go down, it just means, okay, that wasn't the right answer necessarily, but that's something that you've learned, right? That's the outcome of your experiment. So you've got to reframe this thinking and make it about having experiments with results rather than I'm going to succeed or fail at any particular thing, right? So I want to really emphasize that. And lean principles and design thinking both have this baked into them. So if you are familiar with lean, or you've heard of design thinking, or if you're not, look up both of them. They both have at their hearts experimentation, right? And they are leading edge concepts of how do we go about improving our products rapidly, right? And then this last aspect is these experiments need to be small investments. Yes, you're going to spend money, right? But they're going to inform decisions. They're going to provide you with more data upon which to make good decisions that are going to help you with what Jen was talking about, making that progress towards that vision in small steps, right? So now let's talk about how do we make this a little bit more. I'll pause for a minute, Jen, if anything you want to add here before I talk about making this concrete.
Yeah, no, I only want to add that I think failure is our opportunity it really is the way that we learn and grow. And when I interview product managers, I often ask the question, tell me about a time you failed. And it's not because I want to hear, the thing about, tell me about your weaknesses, the old interview thing that you have to try to make your weaknesses sound like a strength. It's not. I'm not asking the question, tell me how your failure is a strength. I want to hear what they failed and how they learned from it, because to me, that is where a product manager gets their chops, right? From those failures, from understanding what to avoid next time. We can look at failure as this is our weeding out process, our weeding out of what not to do, right?
Right, completely agree. And those failures are those learning moments, right? I've definitely learned more by doing something wrong than by doing it right the first time, right? Definitely something that was more instructive in my own career. So way to bring it to both the individual as well as about the product. All right, so let's talk about how we go out making these concrete. So we don't want to be afraid to fail. Instead, we want to create a culture of experimentation and learning. And here are some tips on how to go about that. So I already talked about changing your team's language. So you as the leader of a product management team need to start talking about learning and experimentation and stop talking about failure, right? So that's really important to shift the way you're talking about things, right? The second one is, and this is crucial because when I'm training classes and I get to the market research section of the course, inevitably the number one complaint is, yeah, but I don't get the time or the money to do this. So as a product management leader, it is incumbent upon you to provide the resources here, right? Are you going to be able to help provide real budget and real time, or time to engage with the user experience team, or time to go get a third party to help conduct market research, or time to put the extra coding that you need to into your app so you can instrument it and be able to then measure things instead of just blindly throwing new features out there and not being able to see whether or not they have a benefit or not. That's the kind of change you're going to have to make as a leader. You're going to have to provide that resource. And that may require that you have to build up some expertise with this and be able to prove to your management that in fact it's deserving of having more budget. And there are a number of things, we can't go into too much depth here, but I have one idea of how to go about doing this in a moment, but that's going to be a crucial part of your success. You can't just talk about it and then not give the resources, to the time and the money to make it happen. If you want to talk a little bit about that one as well, Jen. All right,
No,
so then, yeah, requiring data for decisions. So if you don't require the results of experiments, if you don't require that you don't need the data on the latest usability of a feature, then folks aren't going to go get it. But if you start actually making these data requirements part of the decision gates, okay, I'm not going to approve, Mr. or Mrs. Product Manager, the next release of your product without the data to back up, this is why we should go about doing this, that's going to change the culture, right? And again, you got to be transparent about it. You can't play gotcha with them and like have them come to the decision meeting and then ask a whole bunch of questions where they had no idea you were going to expect that data, right? Up front, these are the things I'm going to expect. You've established KPIs for your product. Now, what are going to be the incremental improvements that we're looking for, right? What are our new objectives to let us make that incremental progress towards that North Star, right? It all connects together, okay? So you've got to require data for decisions. And then you've got to reward experimentation. If there is a team that is doing more experimenting than others, then highlight that. Ask that product manager to share their best practices, right? So that the rest of the team gets an understanding of this is how I could go about doing this on my product, right? And reward experimentation in the wider organization. Some of what you have to do as a product management leader is prove the value of the work that you and your development team and QA and UX are all doing all the time to the wider organization. So even executives will see, oh, wow, we conducted 5 experiments this quarter, and these were the results of those experiments. I'm going to want to provide more budget in order to encourage more experimentation next quarter. So you've got to reward the experimentation within your team, and you've got to blow that trumpet loudly across the rest of the organization of like, look what experimentation has taught us, and look how much closer we are to getting to that North Star as a result of doing this experimentation.
It's interesting how contagious that is too. If we're really doing it well as a product team, this requiring data for decisions, always coming to stakeholders with the data behind the decisions, that other work streams also start to think about, and also puts us in a position to be able to ask for the same kind of data for decisions from other work streams as well.
Right, right. But once you've set that up, you've set the bar, and others will be interested in achieving that bar as well. It's a good point. All right, so let's move to number 8. And number 8 is about being a trusted partner. And I went old school on my quote here. I went back to the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. When the trust account is high, communication is easier, instant, and more effective. So you've got to build up this concept of the trust account. And riffing off of Mr. Covey, I went with the currency of trust in 2 dimensions. First, each individual product manager is going to have to build up their trustworthiness, if you will, with the rest of the product team, okay? And then the whole product management team, you as the leader of the entire product management team, have to build up the trustworthiness of your product management organization. And a couple of tips here, right? You've got to be true to your word. And being true to your word means pretty simple, right? Do what you say what you do, and then only promise what you can deliver. Excuse me for a second. And that's a crucial one. You want to under-promise, over-deliver, rather than the other way around. So try not to make promises that you can't achieve, and that means that you expect that of your product managers, as well as the overall product management team. You're not going to over-promise things, and that can be hard sometimes. So you're going to have to sometimes put up your hand and say, sorry, I can't promise that to you. And here is why I don't want to. And be explicit. I don't want to make this promise because I'm afraid I can't deliver it. And I think that actually in those kind of conversations helps people realize, okay, I get it now. Rather than just blindly signing up to something that an executive insists you do, you have a more thoughtful conversation about, okay, I can't sign up for that because I'm afraid I can't deliver it. And then that opens up a much more powerful dialogue, and that builds up that trust account. When you make a mistake, be open about it. You want to encourage that with your individual product managers. You also want to be doing that yourself. So as a leader, I make mistakes all the time, and I have to admit those mistakes to my team, right? And I do that more frequently, right? I've got to own that, right? And that just makes me more trustworthy when I do make mistakes. And we're all human, so we all make mistakes, right? And then have a partnering attitude. And what I mean by this, when I talk about partnering attitude, is that you've got to build trust amongst your other leader peers so that you can count on each one of them and they can count on you. And let me give you a concrete example on this one. I was once on a call, and this was a company where we had a major development team over in the other side of Canada. All of a sudden, I can't think of the name of the city, but we were way over there, and I was over here on the West Coast. We were on a call, and a peer level director had made a mistake that was going to cause a slip in our schedule. But rather than blame him in front of his superiors, I instead just said, look, we're going to take care of this issue. We've got a problem. We're going to take care of it. I kind of glossed it over, quite frankly, that where the source of the problem was. And I just said, look, the whole team's going to figure this out. We're going to figure it out. And in 5 minutes after that call ended, he called me and he appreciated that I had not thrown him under the bus. And I built a relationship that day with this partner of mine who I was going to need help from all the time, right? I saw no benefit from blaming him. Instead of just like, take one for the team and let's make this a team effort to fix it, right? So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about here, where even when there are others who are at fault or there are weaknesses and issues, you don't throw them under the bus. You work with them in the background and say, look, I need you to be better at this. And we did have that conversation one-on-one, right? But in front of the whole group or in front of the leadership, we will take care of the business. We'll figure this out, right? So that kind of attitude is what I mean when I talk about a partnering attitude. And I hope that example helps. And you will gain so much trust when you take this approach and you always keep your eyes on the big prize, which is the team's got to be successful, right? Not just me, not just my product management team, but the whole team that's building the product, the whole company has to be successful. And what's the right path to that? So I hope that helps. We talked last time about being expert, but being expert does not mean being arrogant and being closed-minded. And I mentioned this when I talked about it, but I want to bring it up again. You've still got to have an open mind. You still got to be in a listening mode. So being a trusted partner is in part having a vision, having a passion for that vision, but being open to suggestions or criticisms that might actually make the whole journey to that vision even more powerful, right? Be transparent. So if you're going to make decisions in a certain way, show that that's how decisions get made and everybody understands how to go about doing that. And then be data-driven in your decisions and be consistent about that. And that doesn't mean that you have to be slavishly consistent. If you find that there's a new source of data or there's been a change in the market, then you can explicitly say, you know what, we're no longer going to use this metric anymore. We're going to use this metric instead because now that's what the market cares about, or that's what our customers seem to care more about. And so making changes is okay, but you just need to be explicit about that. So I don't want people to misunderstand that you have to just always ploddingly move forward using the same metrics or the same decision-making processes you always have. You can innovate, you can move forward, and you absolutely should, but you just need to be transparent about that, connecting that previous bullet. Jen, anything you want to toss in here?
Yeah, I just one other thing, and it goes right along with what you were saying about the partner that you didn't throw under the bus, right? I think often when we hit up against an obstacle or trouble and stakeholders are holding us responsible for that, often I think it's human nature to start pointing fingers and placing blame. And in product, we have to remember all the time, I think it's pretty essential. We don't place blame, we solve the problem, right? It's not about who did it. This is reality. This is where we are. And of course, in a reflection, we should go back as a team and look at and reflect on what happened, what went well, what didn't, and what we should do next to improve, what we should try next. But no, none of this finger pointing, and that I think makes you a trusted partner when you immediately turn to problem solving mode.
Right, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about some concrete tips, right? Another quote from Warren Buffett: it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it, right? So all of the tips here are going to be things that require time. That's what I wanted to kind of emphasize on this slide. So the first one is you as a leader have to model trust. So everything on the previous slide, you've got to be bringing to the table every day, right? The second one is set some partnership goals, making sure that, in fact, remember earlier I was talking about what are our metrics, how do we measure success? When you're measuring success of your individual product managers, make sure that building partnerships is part of those OKRs, those objectives and key responsibilities, or those quarterly goal check-ins. Because if you don't make that an explicit metric, then folks aren't going to pay as much attention to it. So that's important as well, right? In terms of transparency, publish your product process. Make it clear to everybody, not just inside PM, but across the wider organization. This is how we operate. This is the phases that we follow. These are the gates that we use. These are the elements that we're going to require, right? And that ties in very well with this last one in terms of make it clear how your decisions are made, so that everybody, there's no gotchas, there's no feeling of surprise. Everybody feels safe, and you're building up that trust by knowing how decisions get made. Anything you want to add there, Jen?
No, I just want to underscore what you had to say about the no surprises, right? No surprises for your partners that you work with, and that includes in big meetings. So they shouldn't be hearing for the first time in a big meeting some pivot or switch. You should have had that conversation ahead of time, and avoid surprises in those meetings. Things will go much smoother.
Right, absolutely. Yep. All right, let's move on to the next one. So back over to you and Jen on enabling ownership.
All right, enabling ownership. I've got the buck stops here, because often in product, Roger and I were talking about this when we were discussing, what are the 10 things that we want to point out, these 10 keys, and this mentality of the buck stops here for building a culture, a powerful culture for product. Product often is in the position of a little bit of a catch-all sometimes, when it's not this work stream's job to solve this problem, when it's not this work stream's job to solve this problem. But as product owners, we own this product top to bottom. And if there's a problem and there is not anyone whose job it is to solve this problem, well, the buck stops here and we have to solve the problem. And whether that means delegating that to someone or imagining what the solution to that problem is, we own it, and the buck stops here. And I think that that's a really important part of developing this product positive culture. Enable your team, empower them, let them know that they have the authority to solve these problems. I had a wonderful boss way early in my career, many years ago. His name is Keith Newman, and he was one of the most powerful influences on me, I think, in my career. He was a fabulous servant leader, and we'll talk about that next. But he really, that first bullet that I have there, encourage solutions when challenges are raised. That was one of those things that he took the time to teach me about early in my career. Jen, don't ever go to a stakeholder, your boss or someone else that you report to with, we have a problem.
Right.
The end. We have a problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That doesn't go over well. But, encourage your team to always, 100% of the time, if they're going to bring up a problem, have thought about it and propose a solution. And it might not even be the solution that you choose or go after, but that is part of ownership, right? It's not boss's job to solve all my problems for me. Although when I bring a problem to my boss and I say, this is how I imagine the solution, often I'll hear a tweak to that solution or something else, but at least this starts the dialogue, and I have ownership in this, and so should your team. And likewise, because we're going to encourage the team to come with solutions when they present a problem, wait until they're done speaking to jump in with your solution, because maybe they are bringing you a solution and maybe they have thought about all of the things that are running through your head as to how you would solve it. And this gives them that feeling that they own this problem and that they own solving it.
Right.
The third bullet there, ask your team to put you to work. This also gives them ownership. All right, you've got a problem and you have a challenge. How would you like to solve that challenge? How can I help you? Right? Give me an assignment to help you solve this problem. If you need me to move obstacles for you, please suggest to me what you would like me to do. And I think that's perfectly a good thing to do. Also, cultivate a volunteer culture. I had a boss, I don't know, 5-6 years ago maybe. He told me about a community event that he held every year, and he was the chairperson of this. And there were a couple of squeaky wheels on this committee that he had, complain, or people who would complain, and he just started to have this volunteer culture, right? If you're going to complain about it, I'm going to assign it to you. And so as a boss, you hear, or as a product manager and someone on your team, is complaining about something, rope them right in. Hey, you've just volunteered to help with this problem.
Right. I love it.
And then the last thing is just to make sure if you are going to give this ownership, make sure that your team has the tools to succeed with it.
Absolutely.
Anything to add there?
No, I think I want you to get to the next one. So let's move into the solution.
So again, how we work, we let go of our vice grip on this micromanagement. We empower. But when we empower, we train. We also give accountability, which means reporting back. Next, we have how we engage. We trust. We have to trust, and it means we have to accept small failures. Again, to the don't be afraid to fail. And then we can measure job satisfaction. We can measure how does that team capacity increase as we give this ownership, and how does this ownership impact our key objectives, our ability to reach them.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize this whole topic very early in my career. I hated it when the product management leader really owned the product. I was just kind of following his or her orders. And so when I became a product management leader myself, it was like, no, you own the product. I am here to help you, but you own the product and I will guide you. But that whole overarching thing is what really makes a product manager step up and really be on fire, is when they own the product. So I want to emphasize that. All right, let's move to the last one here. Right?
Totally agree. All right. This is the last one, and then we're going to get to some really great questions. I've seen a bunch of them coming in. Instill servant leadership. So this is about lifting your team. And I want to go back to this manager that I talked about, Keith Newman. I'm not going to read through all of these bullets. You can read, but I'm going to describe to you Keith Newman, because he was, to me, the quintessential servant leader. Every day he took time for his team. He really invested the time. He was the shield to the team, meaning when there was blame, he took the blame. He says, well, I'm the leader of this team, and whether it was one member of the team that made an error or everyone on the team, it's his mistake. He owned it. Right. Conversely, if there was credit, he always gave it to the individual who did it or the team that did it. So for him, it was take all the blame, take none of the credit. And I watched that early. The reason that he was so impactful, I think, to me, was that, it's kind of counterintuitive, but as he took the blame, took responsibility for what happened on his team, as he gave credit, his respect, not just among his team would do anything for him. Anything. They would work hard. They were working smart. They were really solving problems. We loved him, right? But also senior management really had a huge deal of respect for this man who led with integrity and really understood how to help his team move forward. I do want to spend just a little bit of time on that first bullet, be proactive and not reactive. Roger, talking about this just before we started. And I think sometimes, being a servant leader requires some pretty strong soft skills. But this first bullet has nothing to do with soft skills. It is about getting ahead of the curve so that your team does not spend so much time reacting. So you don't turn to your team and put a burden on them of reaction, right? This is where you can take the initiative for your team and solve pain for them down the road. You're going to solve burnout for them down the road. You're going to solve all kinds of problems for them down the road. If you can serve them in this way of thinking about how you can lead proactively so that every day there's not a fire drill, right? And that's a huge burden on a team. And I just wanted to point that one out because I don't think it's obvious all the time when we think about servant leadership.
That's a good point, to have that vision to the future. All right.
So how we work. We work in horizons 2 and 3 so that, again, we can be proactive rather than reactive and help avoid unnecessary burden for our team. We also provide growth opportunities for our team. The next one, how we engage. We build community. We do those things that Keith did. We invest the time. We take the blame and we give the credit. We also are not doormats.
Mm-hmm.
Constructive criticism and constructive feedback. It's very similar to the situation that Roger talked about earlier, right? With that, with the other person that he didn't throw under the bus, but later took him aside and had a very frank conversation with him. This is also about being a servant leader. I'm not afraid to for you to not like me when I tell you this feedback, and I'm sacrificing this for you, right? Mm-hmm. To help you be better and Absolutely. Be generous with your time for your team.
So on that work on horizons 2 and 3 point, I think just to make that clearer, what you're talking about is looking not just in front of your face, but looking out at to the edge of the room and then to beyond the end of the building kind of thing, right? That's what you're talking about when you say building these different horizons, right?
Yes, exactly. So that we can be proactive, so we can head off problems before they occur.
Right. Great. Excellent. Great examples. Okay, so I'm hoping now that folks have learned, the power of a team culture, this underpinning, this stuff that's below the surface of the water, perhaps, right? And how powerful it can be to work on these tips that will help create a team culture that will drive and propel your team into a more powerful team. We gave you this framework from Gartner to shape it, right? And we talked about the second set of the 5 keys to successful PM culture today. I encourage you to go visit or watch the webinar, and I'm going to give you a link in a little while where you can see all of our webinars, our past webinars. You can go see that one. And then we've given you some tips of how you will go about shaping your team with these concrete examples. So hopefully you've learned those things. We recapped on these 5, but now I'm going to conduct the final poll, and we're going to start diving into questions because we've had a little time that we can start answering some of the great questions that we saw. We're going to actually kind of do a thing where we do some of the questions that we didn't have time to answer last time, and we'll also talk about some of the questions that we've gotten today, right? All right, so let's start this questions while folks are answering. The first question is easy. It's the very bottom one. Will you be sending out the deck again? So we don't send the decks out because we've got some proprietary materials in here, but we will send out a recording to the entire webinar. So you'll be able to watch the webinar, but we don't send out the whole deck, right? So I just want to be clear about that. So our first question comes from Beverly, and she asks, when part of your product dev team is outside vendor, how do you balance learning and experimenting when it's costing you money every time something fails? And you've hired them to be the experts. How do you extend this culture to your vendors? And I've got an idea, but Jen, I'll let you chime in if you've got something you want to say here.
Yeah, I think this goes right along again with incremental testing. We don't build it before we test, right? And we do this, we perform very, very thin tests, just enough for users to react to and move from there before we build. And that will also help you to avoid building things that are going to fail.
Right. With the external vendors thing, we just actually went through this here at 280 Group. We had a relationship with a particular vendor where we would give them instructions and they would give us a quote on time and materials and then go build it. And we've changed that relationship. And to their credit, they were the ones who kind of came to us about this, but we've learned a lot in terms of we've changed the relationship to it's not time and materials, it's instead, here are the objectives that we want to achieve with making these changes. So now we have set goals where we're going to make this change to a flow on our website, and we expect that that's going to increase the amount of leads that we generate, and they're owning part of that. So now it isn't just go get that job done. We all have a mutual goal of achieving and increasing this particular metric, and they're in it, and they're not going to charge us more money when that doesn't happen with the first try. So they're now more experimenting, and they're now being held to these goals. So you might try working on that kind of change in your relationship with external vendors. And I hope that helps in that question. All right, let me start the poll so folks can see us, because I know that
while you're looking at that, I think that what you just said ties back to last meeting that we had. We talked about that same issue, right? With the not just checking boxes, but this is about outcome and not output, right? And so maybe it is the same with our vendors as well. It's about outcome. It's not about the output.
Yep, exactly. So another question came in. My leadership style is more of a servant leadership. However, in situations where there are alphas in the room that want to break all the rules, I find I have to change my style. How do you handle type A alpha leaders when you are a servant leader in the room? Has radical candor helped you, or do either of you practice radical candor?
So that is a really great and important question because I would practice radical candor in that situation. Everybody has the language that they speak, and communication is key. Communication means that they are hearing what you are saying, right? That they understand what you're saying. And some people require that level of blunt.
Yes.
I don't know.
I want to reemphasize what you
Else?
said. Servant leadership does not mean being a doormat, right? That's very important to understand. And if you're in the service of the larger need, and someone is taking things in a direction that doesn't work, then you need to stop that conversation and say, hold on, let's refocus. What are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we go about making decisions? This isn't helping, right? And you don't want to necessarily be that confrontational about it, but you want to be pointing out, we need to be able to do this, this, and this, because that's what we said we would do, right? So you want to reset the rules sometimes when somebody may be getting off track. And I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I think that's another important point. In that situation, if you have set a culture of this is how we make decisions, we make data-driven decisions, then it's easy for you to say, this is my data. I'm so happy to entertain other ideas. Do you have data to support your idea?
Right, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next question, which was, beyond the product owner's roles and responsibilities as part of the Scrum team, product management roles and responsibilities includes training, demos, rollout plan. How do you balance the Scrum team's desire to continue charging ahead to deliver more and more capabilities instead of or against customer adaptation and feedback and possibly stepping back? Now, I have a thought, but go ahead.
Yeah. So there is a concept, and I would encourage you to look up this concept called dual track agile.
Yes.
What that means is that one track, and it's maybe a very small group of people who are always looking ahead, always doing the discovery ahead,
right.
And the other track is executing. And as we go, this track that's doing discovery starts feeding into the execution track as it moves along. And that's how I would handle that.
Totally agree. That's a great point. And in fact, our latest course, Digital Product Management, talks about how to go about doing dual track agile. All right, we got time for one more question. And one of the questions, by the way, was about, hey, you mentioned a worksheet. I'm going to get to that in just a second, so I won't have time for that. But I think we can answer one more question. How do you deal with product managers who are not participative, let alone visible? I'll take that one.
Participative.
Yeah, so product management, product managers do require a degree of communication and leadership skills. And so for folks who may be, but I have seen a good product manager who is an introvert. So let me talk about that for a second, right? So for somebody who is more by their nature quiet and less talkative, this is a harder role. And you do need to have that conversation with that person and say, if you really want to be a product manager, you're going to have to stretch yourself. And that is possible, right? So you just need to be more explicit in, when I'm not talking, I'm thinking, and have the product manager be willing to say that to people so that they're being open, they're being vulnerable, but they're being open and transparent about how they operate. But then also encourage that product manager to do something like maybe take Toastmasters, right? I have, over the course of my career, had several different people on my teams where I've said, you know what, I would really recommend you go do some Toastmasters. People think it's just about public speaking, but it isn't just about public speaking. It's also about building confidence and being more willing to be participative, right? So I would recommend that as a couple of tips. I don't know, Jen, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, I think it's just a conscious decision they have to make. And as we go along our product tracks, I don't know if you have, your annual evaluations. This is probably something good to put on their goals for the year and to touch base on often.
Yep. So I thought we had a slide in here that talked about it, but I don't think we dropped it into the last minute. But there is a worksheet that we're going to provide you, and we're going to provide the link to you of this worksheet that It will be in the email, the follow-up email that you receive from us. And that worksheet has two parts to it. The worksheet actually has a page, which I printed out because I wanted to test and make sure the page looked good when you printed it out. So let me just move my screen so I can. So the first part of it is this worksheet is something you can put up on your wall. Just a reminder of what are the 10 keys to unlocking a winning product team. And then the rest of the worksheet is a set of tables that helps you identify for each of the 10, how do you feel you're doing right now? Are you doing well on each of those 10? And then the last part of the worksheet is then, okay, pick the 3 that you feel like aren't going so well and write out, using the 4 dimensions, write out what am I going to change in my approach to my team that's in those 4 dimensions going to help boost our capabilities in one of those 3 areas. This worksheet is going to put into practice the things that we've been talking about over the course of these 2 webinars. And I pasted the link into the chat box. Grab that link to be able to see part 1. Once again, we're at time, so I want to thank Jen Cano on your day of moving. Thank you for joining us and covering the remaining 5 of these. I hope everybody enjoyed our webinar and got a lot out of it. And we look forward to your feedback and look for that email that will have the follow-up worksheet. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you. All right. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Good luck finishing packing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.